With all the craziness happening with ICE, immigration, the protests, what is the biblical response to all of this? Does the Bible approve of a strong border, of nation states, of the order of law, of immigration, and how to treat foreigners? And so I did a deep dive. Let's go through it. So I'm a Bible-believing Christian, Genesis to Revelation. I believe it. That's my worldview. That's where I stand. So the Bible tells us in the beginning, we basically have a common language. The people grouped up together in basically the area of Babylon, and they eventually started creating a tower to the heavens so that they could proclaim themselves as gods. God didn't like that, so he initiates the creation of nation states by confusing their language. So the first step is a nation state is defined by a common language. When all the people at the Tower of Babel, they grouped together by a common language. Second, the reason God did this is he wanted them to spread out across the world, and instead they were staying in one central location and building a tower to the heavens. So confusing their language then got them to start spreading out to different land parts. So then you have land borders. So common language, land borders, and then the third is they had a shared culture, values, and belief. This is how a nation state holds together. We had many nation states created at that time. Reference Deuteronomy 32 for that worldview. And it was apportioned to the number of the sons of God. This is another side rabbit hole. If you don't know about this, I'd recommend the Unseen Realm book by Dr. Michael Heiser. So then God chooses to create his own nation. The other nations that he had created, he said, hey, sons of God, divine council, you were responsible for these. He apportioned those nations to those, and God chooses to create his own nation from Abram. He promised Abram that he would make him a great nation. Genesis 12. He promises a land with borders, that land that happened to be occupied by other nations. This is where we get into a little bit of land conquest. So later in Exodus and Joshua, God instructs Israel to remove those nations, conquer the land, and take possession. All of human history has people groups conquering other people groups, conquering other land, taking it over. This whole ridiculous left-wing lie about, you're on stolen land. Okay, we're on conquered land. That's what it is. We conquered this land. And it happens to be historical and biblical. It happens. God uses nations and empires for his purposes, both to be a blessing and a punishment. He used Israel as a nation to reveal his truth, to reveal himself, and bring us the Messiah. He used Babylon and Assyria to punish Israel when they turned away from God, and he used Rome for the setting of the Messiah when Jesus appeared, but also 300 years after his death for the proliferation of Christianity. In Daniel 2:21, it says, "It is he who changes the times and the epochs. He removes kings and establishes kings." God is in control of the governments. He establishes nation states. We are allowed to have a strong and protected border. But there's a caveat here too. God commands us not to mistreat or oppress the foreigner. Exodus 22:21, Leviticus 19:34, Deuteronomy 27:19, all basically say we are to love them as we love ourselves. We are to provide them justice. Now, the word for stranger, alien, foreigner, sojourner, the Hebrew word, probably going to butcher it, but it's ger, G-E-R. It often means temporary inhabitant or dweller. Now, sometimes it can mean a full-time living, but there's a distinction made between a full-time foreigner and a citizen. To be a citizen, it is required to adopt the culture, the customs, and the religion. The Bible is full of prominent characters who were immigrants. Now, Abraham, Genesis 11, Joseph, Jacob and the 12 tribes, Genesis 37 through 50. They fled their land because of famine and went to Egypt, happened to stay for about 400 years, but then came out of Egypt. Moses fled to Midian after he killed the Egyptian soldier. Ruth, she was a Gentile. She immigrated to Israel. She assimilated. She adopted the culture, the customs, and the religion. We have David. He fled to Moab for a time. 1 Samuel 22. And then Jesus himself. This is often said as an argument, right? Jesus was an immigrant. Yes, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph fled to Egypt, Matthew 2, for a short time. Now, at the most, it was 2 to 3 years. It was most likely just a few months, but it was just a short time, and then they went right back to their homeland. The Bible is clear that God has a heart for the immigrant, the refugee, the resident alien, and the stranger. But the Bible is also draws distinction between legal and illegal immigration. Nowhere in Scripture does God encourage Israel or any nation to adopt an open border policy. The Bible distinguishes between the rights of citizens, resident aliens, and foreigners, as well as those who break the law. Now, another interesting thing is that heaven has its own immigration policy. Now, it is open to all who want it with one requirement, established in John 14:6 and Romans 10:9, right? John 14:6, Jesus told his disciples, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one gets to the Father except through me. Romans 10:9. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. The immigration policy to heaven is only through Jesus Christ, and when you do that, you become assimilated through sanctification, becoming more like Christ. Now, there are borders separating heaven and hell. Even in God's realm, there are strict borders. In Luke 16, Jesus tells the disciples a parable about Lazarus and the rich man. In that parable, Abraham from heaven tells the rich man in hell, there's a great chasm fixed between so that those who want to go from here to you cannot, nor can anyone cross over from there to us. Strict borders between heaven and hell. You cannot cross between them. Once you're in one, you can't go to the other. The Great Commission is focused on nation states. In Matthew 28, when Jesus tells his disciples, go forth and make disciples of all nations, he didn't say, go and open up the borders of all nations. He just said, go and make disciples of all nations. Again, establishing that there can still be nation states. Christians who support unlimited immigration, especially illegal immigration, I think they willfully ignore Romans 13. Paul lays out that God institutes governments in order to praise good, punish evil. I think some Christians have a selective application of Romans 13. When it suits their view, such as like in COVID, when a lot of Christians were saying get the shot, they would point to Romans 13. But now, when it comes to removing illegal immigrants from our country, they ignore Romans 13 and want to just protect the illegal immigrants. So the government was instituted by God, but it's also for us to obey to the extent that it doesn't violate God's laws. Nation states or countries, they are allowed by God to have secure and protected borders, to have a just, fair system for legal entry and immigration, and to enforce the law of the land. So in all, what I see is a major issue with current immigration is the severe lack of assimilation to American values, beliefs, culture, language. I see this especially when it comes to flying a flag. If you're not flying the American flag in America, but you're flying a foreign country's flag, it's illogical to me. I come from a family of immigrants. A fourth great-grandfather immigrated from Germany, started farming in northern Illinois, took wild land and made it a farm. But I guarantee you, they were not flying the German flag when they came over. And generations after them, they weren't flying the German flag at their house either. They came over, they said, we are Americans, we will speak English, we will fly the American flag, we will assimilate into the American culture, the beliefs, the worldview of America. And let us not forget that tens of millions flooded through our border illegally during the 4 years of Biden. And right now, this administration is working to remove those illegals, a lot of which are criminals. Rapists, murderers, you name it. There is a gamut of criminal illegal aliens, but in the first part, they already broke the law just by crossing that border. That law, once broken, it requires being sent back. They are essentially cutting in line in front of anybody else who is going through the legal method to immigrate here or become a citizen. Just like when you're at a grocery store and there's a long line at checkout, would you be silent if some jackwagon comes up and cuts right to the front? I guarantee you, if it was 10 people deep and somebody cut to be, number one, all 10 of those people are gonna say something. It's the same thing when it comes to immigration. When you cross over illegally, you're breaking the law and you're cutting in line for all of those who took the time and the effort to go the legal route.